problems of poverty and denial of freedom to people in this country, almost every single one of them is a result of government action and would be eliminated if you eliminated the bad government failures. Let me be precise and specific. Why do we have so high an unemployment rate among black teenagers? It's a disgrace and a scandal. Why do we have so high an unemployment rate? First of all, because we give them lousy schooling through governmental schools, which make them unqualified to hold decent jobs. And second of all, we require employers to discriminate against them by not hiring them unless their productivity is enough to justify a minimum wage. The minimum wage rate is the most anti-Negro law in the books. And it's an anti-Negro law because it precisely, having first not enabled the young blacks to have a decent schooling so that they can have productivity, we next deny them the on-the-job training that they might get if you could induce employers by being able to hire them for relatively low wages to give them on-the-job training that would make them qualify for higher payment and higher productivity. In the third place, we have constructed a governmental welfare scheme which has been a machine for producing poor people. We have induced people to come under control of welfare. I'm not blaming the people, don't misunderstand me. It's our fault for constructing so perverse and so ill-shaped a monster as the whole set of welfare programs we have under which we encourage people, families to break up. We encourage people to move from one part of the country and come to another, under which we have, in effect, made many people poor. And yet, when all this is said and done, have I ever been where? I have, sir. Of course, more so than most of the people in this room.
If you want to preserve your power indefinitely, you have to get the consent of the ruled. And this they will do partly by drugs, as I foresaw in Brave New World, partly by these new techniques of propaganda. They will do it by bypassing the sort of rational side of man and appealing to his subconscious and his deeper emotions and his physiology even, and so making him actually love his slavery.
Multiculturalism has not only taken root in schools, I think it is uncritically accepted by a lot of Americans, haven't thought it through. In this book, you assault it head on. You describe it as a barrier to progress and a lot of other things. Explain why multiculturalism, if you would, is bad.
I guess it starts from a false premise, which is that there's something that all cultures are equal in some undefinable sense, which has never been the case. I mean, some cultures are better at some things, worse at other things, and at particular times in history, one group's culture may be ascendant, and another time another group's. But what you almost never see is what they assume is a norm, namely all groups performing pretty much the same in all kinds of fields across the board. That you can go through centuries of history without finding a single example of that.
You say that assumption, in fact, holds different groups down. You write, quote, multiculturalism, like the caste system, paints people into the corner where they happen to have been born, but at least the caste system doesn't claim to benefit those at the bottom.
Absolutely. So when the multiculturalists say, for example, that the schools should not try to make black students speak standard English, the difference between speaking standard English and not speaking standard English can be huge in terms of your job, your careers, and all sorts of other things.
So tell me how it's changed. You've had a remarkable academic career. You've written 35 books. You've taught at the most prestigious universities in the world. I don't think you grew up in a family where that was going to be expected. I don't think your dad was a college professor. How was your education different from the education kids are receiving now?
It was better. That's the straight answer. I went to school in Harlem, but even if you went into school in Harlem in the 1940s and you were in one of the better classes, because they did have ability grouping throughout the system, you got a very good education that would enable you to go anywhere. Some years ago, someone at Forbes said that it was remarkable that I come out of the Harlem schools and went on to these universities. It was not that unusual. In fact, someone who lived about 3 blocks from me in Harlem sent me a letter, said, my gosh, in this one tenement, we had a college professor, a priest, a doctor, and a lawyer when this fellow was growing up. So this was not that unusual. Now, those avenues upward are simply not there.
Now, what was the difference, if you could put a point on it? What did your teachers teach you or not teach you that allowed you, and it sounds like other people on your block, not a rich area, to succeed?
First of all, they taught us the English language. They taught us the standard academic subjects. They were not teaching us, tree hugging. They were not teaching us how to use condoms. They were not teaching us to be victims. And they held us to the same standards that they held other kids to. Now, those of us who came from homes where there were no truly educated people, it was a little harder on us. But that's nothing compared to how hard it was going to be if they had made allowances and lowered the standards for us.
Yes. This book is packed with all kinds of interesting information that I had never heard before. This really jumped out at me. You talk about the grotesque, really, disparity between black and white unemployment rates. The black unemployment rate is much higher than the white unemployment rate, but you say that wasn't always the case. You say black labor force participations were higher than that of whites up until about 1930. What changed?
What changed was the government intervention in the labor market. 1930 was the last year in which there was no federal minimum wage. They brought in the Davis-Bacon Act. In fact, some of the sponsors of the Davis-Bacon Act said that they were producing that act precisely because blacks from the South, construction workers, were coming up north, and the construction companies were able to underbid the northern companies and get government contracts. And so this was meant to put a stop to that.
Amazing. So just to be totally clear, up until 1930, under the Roosevelt administration, or of course that would have been the Hoover administration, but up until that point, there were lower unemployment rates in black neighborhoods than white neighborhoods. And that has been the result, do you think, of lack of government intervention?
Not always, but in 1930 that was certainly the case, and that was not the first time that it was the case. The huge gap that you see today, that all has occurred under minimum wage laws.
Huh, remarkable. What's the future of affirmative action? You write at some length about that. Will it continue?
Oh, good. It all depends upon whether the Supreme Court wants to give a clear decision one way or the other, or whether they want to do what they've been doing now for more than 30 years, saying pious things so that you can't have quotas, but then leaving wiggle room so that you really can have quotas, so long as you don't call them quotas.
Huh. Do you think you often hear people say, well, affirmative action may be unfair, but it's helped a lot of people? You buy that?
It may have helped some people, but on net balance, I don't believe it has. There's a marvelous study done showing that when they banned banned affirmative action in California, University of California system, blacks began to graduate at a much higher rate than before, graduate with much higher grade point average, graduated in subjects like math and engineering to a far greater extent than before, because now the students went to those particular parts of the university system that fitted their particular academic preparation, and they graduated. Before, you know, you could flunk out of Berkeley or UCLA, which does you no good. Now you can graduate from Davis or Santa Cruz and go on to a career.
I can say pretty much anything to a British audience. And they'll go, oh, okay, yeah, we disagree, we agree. But if I say anything about the NHS, oh my God, it'd be dangerous for me to leave. Because you guys, I mean, for you, the NHS is like religion. It's like, it's unbelievable. And that's the truth. I mean, of course I'd abolish the NHS. The NHS is killing you guys. It is killing you guys. This is, well, let me finish.
No interrupting.
Let me finish. I said it. I'm going to take this point. If you had cancer, if you're healthy, by the way, if you're young and healthy, the NHS is wonderful. Because you don't need it. You have a little bit of sniffles, you go into the doctor, they give you aspirin, and they don't charge you, and you think that's wonderful. But if you have cancer, or if you have heart disease, you do not want to be in the UK. Because you, well, let me finish. I get it. Because you're going to wait in long lines for your MRI, you're going to wait in long lines for your CAT scan, you're going to wait in long lines for your surgery. The best doctors who are not making any money here are going to go overseas, they're going to go into the private sector. You are getting, and the older you get, the more this will affect you, you are getting mediocre, at best, mediocre treatment when you get really sick.
Okay, no,
Let me finish. Doctors earn, as compared to the States, less, and in the States, doctors are earning less now because we're socializing healthcare in the United States. So doctors are leaving the profession, and we're getting fewer and fewer doctors in the United States. And there's a shortage of doctors. More patients, shortage of doctors. As the population's aging, fewer doctors. If you want high quality healthcare, if you want high quality education, education and healthcare are some of the most important values we have in the world. The last people you want running it is the government. They have no incentive to make it work well. You don't have a customer relationship. There's no competition. There's no innovation. 75% of all innovation in the world in healthcare happens in the one country that has a little bit of freedom left in healthcare, which is the United States. I want every entrepreneur that goes in and makes a stupid little app for this thing, because this is the only place where we still have a little bit of freedom in the world. I wanted to think about how to build the best school in the world possible, to build a great educational product, because our mind is much more important than an app. I want him to figure out the next best way to cure cancer or heart disease. But if you take the profit motive out of those treatments, the incentive goes away, the motivation goes away. Not only that, going back to cost. What happens in freedom, in a free market, in every single product and service, every single one, is that as competition and innovation happen, prices go down and quality goes up. Just look at the world you live in. The stuff you take for granted is this stuff, because that's the stuff being produced. And what happens? Prices here, they go down and quality goes up. in everything that's true except in two areas, healthcare and education. Why? Because those are dominated, even in the United States, by government. Government perverts the incentives. It perverts the incentive to innovate. It perverts the incentive to compete. It perverts the incentive to keep prices down. It perverts the incentive to increase quality. Now, poor people in a real market economy could buy insurance. You know how much insurance, health insurance in the United States, in places that have very few regulations, costs? Less than your monthly cell phone bill. That's how much it costs to get insurance in places. And that's why people who believe in socialized medicine don't want insurance companies in the United States to compete across state lines, because they don't want the truth to be discovered that in some places in the US, you can buy health insurance for less than a cell phone bill. Now, every poor person in America, almost 95%, I think, have cell phones. Healthcare is more important than a cell phone. You can give up a cell phone. Go buy insurance. Right? Now, that's in a world where we've got massive regulations. Imagine if there were no regulations, all those costs, all that insanity that the government brings to the insurance market. I, for example, I'm 53 years old. I've got two sons, a little older than you guys. I'm not going to have any more kids. My wife's done. We were done 20 years ago. We were done, right? Right? I mean, even if we wanted to, we couldn't at this point. This is the reality. I have to buy maternity coverage because the state of California has decided that you cannot sell an insurance policy in California without maternity coverage. So guess what? I pay more money than I should. Much more money than, I'm never going to do acupuncture. I tried it a long time ago. I'm not going to do acupuncture. It doesn't work for me. I don't know if it works for you. It doesn't work for me. In the state of California, I buy coverage that covers acupuncture. But I'm never going to use it. Still have to pay for it. So the insanity of the government telling me what's good for me, of the government determining to me for you what kind of insurance, raises the cost and reduces the quality. The best thing you can do for healthcare. By the way, I come from a country with socialized medicine, as socialized as the NHS, which is Israel. And Israel has a pretty good healthcare system because it has lots of doctors. Why does Israel have a lot of doctors? Because it's the Jewish state, right? It has a lot of doctors, and they're good doctors. But if you're really, really sick in Israel and you have the money, you fly to the United States of America. When Berlusconi in Italy gets sick, he doesn't come to the UK to benefit from the NHS. He goes to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. That's the standard. The standard is the Mayo Clinic. And figuring out how to provide the Mayo Clinic to poor people is an interesting issue. But you don't do it by socializing it. You don't do it by destroying the Mayo Clinic, which is what the NHS has done.
None of us are greedy. It's only the other fellow who's greedy. The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests. The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. Einstein didn't construct his theory under order from a bureaucrat. Henry Ford didn't revolutionize the automobile industry that way. In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history are where they have had capitalism and largely free trade. If you want to know where the masses are worst off, it's exactly in the kinds of societies that depart from that. So that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear. that there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of the ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by a free enterprise system. The only way in which you can redistribute effectively the wealth is by destroying the incentives to have wealth. And the question is, what is the way, what is a system which will offer those people who are so unlucky as to be born without good positions, what is the system which will offer them the greatest opportunity?
Well, one possible way of redistributing the wealth without affecting the incentives to earn as much income as possible is simply to have a 100% inheritance tax. Since that won't affect the incentives, it's only after the person's dead anyway.
I beg your pardon. I'm afraid I don't know the family you come from. I don't, but as you grow up, you will discover that this is really a family society and not an individual society. We tend to talk about an individualist society, but it really isn't. It's a family society. And the greatest incentives of all, the incentives that have really driven people on, have largely been the incentives of family creation, of family, of pursuing, of establishing their families on a decent system. What is the effect of 100% inheritance tax? The percent of an 100% inheritance tax is to encourage people to dissipate their wealth in high living.
What's the harm in that?
The harm in that is that where do you get the factories? Where do you get the machines? Where do you get the capital investment? Where do you get the incentive to improve technology if what you're doing is to establish a society in which the incentive is for people who, if they by accident accumulate some wealth, to waste it in frivolous entertainment? You know, the thing is that the thing that is amazing that people don't really recognize is the extent to which the market system has, in fact, encouraged people and enabled people to work hard and sacrifice in what I must confess I often regard as an irrational way for the benefit of their children. One of the most curious things to me in observation is that almost all people value the utility which their children will get from consumption higher than they value their own. Here are parents who have every reason to expect that their children will have a higher income than they ever had, and they scrimp and save in order to be able to leave something for their children. I think you are sort of like a bull in a china shop if you talk about the 100% inheritance tax having no incentive effect. It would destroy a continuing society. It would destroy a society. First of all, the government doesn't have any responsibility. People have responsibility. This building doesn't have responsibility. You and I have responsibility. People have responsibility. Second, the question is, how can we as people exercise our responsibility toward our fellow man most effectively? That's the problem. So far as poverty is concerned, there has never in history been a more effective machine for eliminating poverty than the free enterprise system and the free market. The period in which you had the greatest improvement in the lot of the ordinary man was the period of the 19th and early 20th century. Those of us in this room are the heirs of that. We benefited from the way in which our parents and our grandparents were able to come here. And by virtue of the freedom that was offered to them, were able to make a better life for themselves and them and